This is Dale Maharidge. This is me in February of 1983. We had sold the book. Michael and I had gone to New York City, and I did a pit stop in Cleveland to see my parents on the way back to California. And so Michael Williamson and I, of course, worked on the book furiously that late winter. I finished writing it in the summer, and I went home for Christmas of 1983, and looked at what my father did with a different eye. I decided I'm going to document my dad. My father worked hard. You see him here napping between shifts. He'd work all day in the shop, take a nap after dinner, and go out there and put in late hours into the night. It was a D&D tool company behind the house. It's still in business. I was just there in 2011. Glenn, the man who bought it, is still operating it. Hasn't changed very much, except work is slow. So I grew up seeing how my father, working with steel, put food on our table. This is why I'm obsessed with steel. This is what it means to me. It means a good job. It's a dirty job, lots of dust you're breathing, but I saw how my father's hard work made my life the way it is today possible. We were middle class, upper middle class in economic terms for that era. When you do something like making or grinding steel, you're connected with the soil. In the previous show, I talked about the similarity between steel manufacturers and farmers. They're basic products. They're basic things that come from the earth. After I documented my father, I decided to go down to the flats in Cleveland and look at the steel mills again. This is the Republic Steel blast furnace. It's now gone. Republic Steel no longer exists. You can see the terminal tower in the background. And I realized Michael and I should have done this. The Clark Avenue Bridge was closed. It was all rusting and rotting. The Clark Avenue Bridge was never rebuilt. It no longer exists. There were big, do not trespass signs. I'm going to ignore that sign. Because I remember that the bridge went right past the Jones and Laughlin blast furnace. I ditched my car and walked out on the bridge, figuring I'm going to get busted any moment now. On the other end, they had already dismantled half the bridge. But I got out to the point where I could look down and see the blast furnace. And I stood there for hours with a telephoto lens. And what's going on here is they have tapped the furnace, and what you're seeing is molten iron going into a torpedo car. Another channel is taking away the slag. You'll see that in a little bit, which is the molten limestone, which is carrying away the impurities. Now, when I was a kid, there were about 200 blast furnaces making molten iron in America. Last time I checked, there were 20-some. I knew at the time that I was very lucky to be able to get these pictures. And today, I'm not sure if there's any place you can find this kind of vantage point to see iron being made from a blast furnace. A postscript. This blast furnace is gone. It was torn down. There's still a steel mill there in Cleveland, but it's vastly shrunk. To the right of where these pictures are taken was the yard where Jones and Laughlin Steel, where they put their product. They had coils and coils of steel in a giant yard. You saw a picture of that in the previous show. That is now it's called the Steel Yard Commons, and there's a Walmart supercenter there. Now, Walmart is America's largest employer. It has 1.4 million workers. And I know some of these workers. I've interviewed them, and they're good workers, and there's good people at Walmart. I don't want to disparage Walmart workers. But when I was a kid, the big employers were steel mills, car manufacturers. We made things with our own hands. There was something way more satisfying about that. Also, there was a lot more satisfaction to our wallets. Those jobs, today we would pay $25 or $30 an hour or more, compared to the $8 or $10 an hour, $10 an hour being tops for most workers at Walmart. So we went from being a country that made things to a country that sells things made overseas, mostly in China, at Walmart. Some people have accused me over the years of romanticizing workers. Maybe that's true. Maybe I've been guilty of romanticizing the working class. It was tough, hard work. I'm not sugarcoating it. But goddamn, it was real work. If that's romanticizing, I'll accept that charge. I wish we had more jobs that paid well. I wish we were making more things in this country. I miss that. After the torpedo cars were full, they were hauled to the BOP shop, the BOP shop, the basic oxygen process, where they injected carbon into the iron to create steel. This is the Slag Pit. The molten limestone is channeled off to run into it, allowed to cool, and then it's hauled away. It's made into gravel. for driveways. When I was a kid, I remember seeing the gravel in our driveway had chunks of iron in it. Looking back at these images I made in 1983, I think of Bruce Springsteen's interpretation of our book in the song Youngstown, where he ends it with the steelworker staring into the fiery furnaces of hell. That day on the Clark Avenue Bridge, I was staring into the fiery furnaces of hell. I felt the hell's heat that afternoon. It was a cold, cold day that Christmas season of 1983, and I was warm looking down at these fires. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a beautiful sight. Years later, when Bruce Springsteen called, all I was left with were mementos of our work, mementos in these artifacts. I'm going to show you a series of things that Michael and I curated over the years. What you're seeing here are a lot of things from the Jenny blast furnace. You see this bumper sticker that was on a locker in the room right next to the blast furnace. And on the day the furnace closed, September 3rd, 1977, someone had noted that. And there's these other artifacts. We preserved them from the wrecking ball. You're going to find out in a later show the Jenny blast furnace no longer exists. It was just torn down. No one cared about this stuff. Some of it was beautiful. This blueprint for a hook for a crane made in 1935, as far as I'm concerned, is a piece of art. The oldest artifact I have is this one from Carnegie Steel, from the famous Andrew Carnegie, who in the late 1800s was one of America's first industrialists with his steel mills. Safety was a big issue in the mills. Lots of things we found dealt with safety. Dangerous work and high-paid work, but dangerous. Even with all the safety precautions. There weren't that many accidents, really, when you think about it, but bad things would happen. Here's a picture of the hard hat from the Jenny blast furnace. We curated that. It was actually not just to take it for preserving it. We wanted to use it when we went down to Texas. We'd heard they didn't treat Yankees too well in Texas. And you're going to hear in a later show about how this hard hat ensured we got very special treatment by the Houston police. So today, the hard hat is in what I call the Steel House. It's my new guest house at my California home with other ephemera from the mills. Steel was part of my life, and because of how I grew up, it always will be part of my life.